Hello, buongiorno. Oi, welcome to Energy Abundance and our new video series we are calling Energy Talk, where we talk to people who work, live, and breathe free energy. My name is Isabella dos Santos. I'm one of the founders of the Energy Abundance Project, and I'm joined by my other founders and colleagues, Karsten Van Asdonk and Casper Boom. And today we're having a lovely conversation with someone we consider an elder in the free energy space, and that is Jeane Manning. Jeane is a longtime journalist and an author of many free energy related books, included Hidden Energy, which Carson and I are actually featured in. She herself has interviewed scientists and inventors for decades, and from what I can tell, loves to share their stories through her writing. So it's a pleasure to hold this space and to welcome you, Jeane.
It's a pleasure to be here. I've admired your work, Isabel, ever since you stepped forward for the new energy movement and put on Earth Day event and a book club online. And now you've joined up with these awesome people in Europe, and you've got your foundation, and this is
Yeah,
going.
thank you. So, Jeane, how about you tell us a little bit about who you are and how free energy came on your path?
Okay, I have various identities in this life: a mother, author. Um, Basically, I've been a social worker, and I've been a newspaper editor of a community newspaper. I've been reporter in magazines, and even a publicist for a theater company that traveled in gypsy wagons pulled by Clydesdale horses, and various jobs that an author does in order to keep food on the table while they're writing books. It's been fun. And then my passion for this field, which actually began 40 years ago this year when I met an inventor. And he was really passionate about what could be done with the new super powerful magnets. And he was trying to figure out where the extra power could be coming from because he'd built this innovative magnetic motor generator. His name was Bill Muller. And so he asked all around what could be going on here. The textbooks say that magnets cannot do work uh, because one magnet's pull will be canceled by the other magnet's push, and so on. All the reasons why that can't be. But yet he was able to show an interesting prototype that was doing interesting things. And um, he even went to a metaphysical club in his town to ask him if they knew anything about this seemingly background energy that comes into magnets to keep them powered. Like they can do work, they can lift heavy weights and indefinitely unless you drop the magnet or subject it to high temperature. They said, well, they encountered ancient concepts like ether and life force and prana. And so he named his company Prawn Technologies. That caught my interest because of my own spiritual studies.
Mm.
But I didn't really get obsessed about the field until about 5 years later when I went with that inventor and his family to a meeting in Southern California called the Meeting of the Minds. And it was in a magnet factory, and they had a magazine called Magnets in Your Future. And that was all very interesting, but it was still a bit of a lark. Um, and then I heard about a Tesla conference happening in Colorado Springs a few weeks from then. So I went to that one too, just because I wanted to find out more about it and see if this was something that I did want to write about. I knew that I can write about the people stories. I don't have the science credentials to ever have any authority as far as a physicist or anything, but I know that I have writing skills, and I can interpret for the general public because there weren't any books written for the general public. There were books by technical people for technical people. But yet I thought this was such a fascinating field that more people should know about it. But like I say, I wasn't really firmly both feet in until I met somebody at that Tesla conference who told me about Victor Schauberger. And I know
Mm.
you all know who Victor Schauberger was. He showed us that it's possible to have technologies, but still be in harmony with nature, because your technologies are working with the laws of nature instead of against them. They're not exploding atoms or burning the Earth's life fluids, the fuels. It's actually finding ways to work with the vortexian movements of water and air and be in harmony. And I thought, okay, now you're speaking my language. Um, so that's when I just really jumped on board and decided, okay, I'm going to learn all that I can so that I can write a book for the general public. And that took another number of years. And that's another kind of marker this year. It's 25 years since my
Wow.
first book, called The Coming Energy Revolution, was published by Avery of New York. And all that's a long story too.
Congratulations on that. How
Yeah.
was the experience of releasing that first book? How was it received back then?
Oh, it was anybody's, any author's first book is really exciting. You know, you rush to the post office and tear open the package and show everybody in the room, look, this is my book. But I didn't know how it would be received by the scientists and engineers that I'd been interviewing all these years. I was kind of scared about that because,
Mm.
you know, who am I to be writing about their work without all their credentials? But I found out they really welcomed it, because here was a book that they could show to their sisters and their colleagues at work and other people who wondered, what the heck are you talking about? What kind of a scene are you into? And so now they had something in hand to say, okay, here, this is written the rest of you, and read this. You know, there was one inventor down south in the US, James Patterson, and his grandson started a business, Clean Energy Technologies Incorporated, CT, around James Patterson's cold fusion Patterson power cell. And his grandson bought the books by the case, because he was giving them to business associates that he was wanting to
Mm.
get interested in CD. So that was really gratifying. And my publisher connected with a French publisher that put out a French edition. No, first connected with a German publisher who ended up keeping it alive longer than the English edition did. And I run into people who still have copy of Freie Energie.
Amazing. Wow.
I know that there are not many books out there that actually building this bridge between the general public and all these new inventions. What's your experience in the field? Did you meet other people, other journalists as well, or why is that not that out there?
Well, not very many journalists who are really getting into the mainstream have the courage to step into a field that's been maligned and dismissed and called voodoo science, and just generally can be a career wrecker for people who are very careful about their reputations. There were a few along the line. There was a man who wrote for Wired magazine who did um, a good summary at one point. Um, but the books were few and far in between. There's a man in England, John Davidson, who wrote a very inspiring book back in the 1990s, and Richard Milton in the UK, and of course, the Schauberger books by Callum Coates in Australia. Just I think I promoted living energies more than I promoted anything that I wrote,
Hmm.
and I was giving those books away too.
And so, how come you are, or you have this courage to break through in this field, even when you see so many journalists backing away from it in fear of ridiculization or slander?
Maybe I'm just not as careful about my financial situation, which has come back to bite me sometimes. I'm like you people, idealistic and tremendous amount of curiosity. So I want to know, this drive to learn, which you understand. And just it's so fascinating. There was an inventor's wife and I that used to talk about this because she was one of the few wives who was really interested in her husband's work, on more than just a supportive wife level, but just really wanting to learn herself. And we said there's no other field that's just interesting. Who would not want to find out about this most fascinating thing going on the planet? We thought.
Yes, exactly. That's what we thought.
It is, with
Yeah.
all the implications. Yeah.
Yes.
How do you think it's different than what's being written about more accepted renewables like solar and wind? Because that's definitely still a hot topic these days, especially in sustainability, talking about solar and alternatives, but free energy is rarely ever mentioned.
Mm-hmm. It is treated differently. Those authors are not criticized for being advocates. They're not expected to present the other side, which is the non-conventional energy technologies. They can just ignore them. And, you don't see anybody accusing somebody who's advocating wind power as advocating perpetual motion.
Yeah, funny.
And you don't see anybody criticizing a solar advocate for advocating voodoo science. just just generally treated differently because they're not really shaking the boat. They're not really threatening to upset the status quo that much. There's room uh, in the market for them, and they've created niches, and they're not really threatening big oil. Yeah.
Makes sense.
And we don't want to threaten anybody, do we?
No.
No, exactly. But then the question becomes also for the general viewer, then what is free energy to you? Why is it so threatening? Why is it so special?
Well, by what is it to me? Do you want a definition?
Yeah, if you want so.
I just go with the definition of somebody who's been in this field longer than me, Peter Lindemann. Dr. Peter Lindemann says that free energy is as anything sourced by the natural world. So that includes wind and solar. But also what we're looking at are no pollution to the environment, like no massive mining of the huge amounts of metals that are required for windmills, or no taking up acres of good land with solar panels. Okay, they're out in the desert, but still, those huge solar farms are not real compatible with the desert creatures. I'm not a criticism of solar. If I could get some solar panels on my house, I would. So what else were you asking about
Yeah,
there?
so in that sense, the free energy becomes threatening because it's really it shakes up the paradigm of this sustainable energy transition that we're in, right?
Right, you're right, Carson. Even the sustainable energy transition, which is all to the good, is ignoring the non-conventional alternatives that could do the job a lot faster, and does not require for people to say, "Oh well, we have to hold our noses and you have to include nuclear power in the mix. You have to have a mix because no, that's not true. You don't have to include anything that creates more radioactivity on our planet, more messes, more wastes. You know, even if they are a generation better than the big old nuclear reactors were, it's still not the harmonious technology. They still don't know what they're going to do about their waste.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah.
Right.
That
I
makes me
think there was
think
another
about.
part to your question. What was it?
Was there? I'm not sure. Maybe Casper can go ahead.
Well, that makes me think about Victor Schauberger you mentioned earlier. Uh, One of the things he said, and don't quote me, like I don't know what he exactly said, of course, but something in all these devices we use currently is these destructive devices exploding.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's out of balance, now we can also use these implosion devices, and that this is showing in our worlds that if we don't change into and like embrace these implosion technologies, we will destroy ourselves in this process. So nuclear is still like, yeah, it's clean, but still the explosion way is the consciousness behind it is explosion.
It's death, really, because that's all fossil fuels are is a bunch of dead plants over millennia. And
Yeah.
then that becomes kind of like the source, and you're exploding this dead matter.
Yeah. You're destroying
Whereas,
that further. Yeah.
yeah, setting that on fire. So really we're surrounded by death. You know, you can metaphorically and quite literally. And so I think implosion is life itself. So we're really talking about a difference between using death force as our source for energy and the literal life force of the universe.
Yeah.
And with that, I think also comes a lot a lot of responsibility. Um, and I think you've touched on that, Jeane, right? On your most recent book, I think in Hidden Energy, which I love. Um, do you think that writing Hidden Energy was a different experience than, say, the one that you wrote 25 years ago?
Oh, I feel more hopeful about the future as time goes on, even as things crumble that are obvious in the news. At this, everything at some level, I think, is in balance somehow. Or like some higher force doesn't allow her to get too far out of balance. So,
Mm.
what's really blatantly obvious in our faces is the breakdown of institutions that are in the news all the time. But at the same time, you know, like just Victor Schauberg talked about the invisible, the silent, the quiet, the cooling, the harmonious notions of nature are silent, but they're just as every bit and even more powerful. And so I think the same is in society that, as you know, there's upswelling around the world of people waking up in various ways, and the hardships of this past year or so have made even more people stop and think about their lives and serious issues. And so the good is happening, but it's just silent. But I think we'll have to, I'm glad you're doing this because we'll have to be a little less silent. It's a crucial time in humankind's kind of a turning point.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous climb. And again, back to Victor Schauberger, he warned that with if humankind uses all the destructive technologies, that somehow society itself could degenerate too, along with the natural world. And we do see signs of some breakdowns in obviously in the entertainment world. There's not the moral caliber that in my parents' generation, for sure, some of the values that my parents taught me are just not that cool, I guess. I mean, to people who are just passively accepting the narrative that's given them, and the messages that come in media that's not that responsible, in entertainment world that's not that responsible about their effects. So yeah, bottom line is it's a time when we have to stand up and really get things going. Yeah.
I love that you say that you're very hopeful for the future, because I don't think you can hear that from many people, especially in this day and age. You know, with all the different kinds of crises going on, and I personally really share that vibration. I really see in front of me a world emerging which is far more loving and beautiful and connected to each other, but also to the earth. And I think that is really something that we can put forward as an energy that really resonates with people's hearts. I think that is so important to have such people around you, not to bring you down, but to bring you up. So thank you for that.
Oh, that's well stated. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me see.
And so I'm also really interested in like I can be called a scientist or an independent scientist. I had a pretty neat discussion with this with Casper over this day.
Yes.
But I consider myself a scientist, and I'd like to find out how stuff works, right? How the technology works. So the first moment I heard the claim that we can generate energy basically out of thin air, it piqued my interest immediately. Like, okay, what? You're serious here? We don't need any fossil fuels. We don't have to use fluctuating wind turbines or whatever, solar panels. And I thought, well, if this is true, then the implications are going to be so big, it's going to change everything. So I dove in, and I'm really curious as to what your vision is on where the energy comes from in these devices, because I'm sure that you met a lot of inventors and you've written about a lot of them in your books, and maybe there's a common ground, and I'm curious to see, where do you think the energy is coming from?
Mm-hmm. Well, I've been taught that energy, of course, can be neither created nor destroyed, but it can be converted from one form to another. So what these devices are doing is converting previously unknown or unclassified or unnamed source of energy into mechanical motion or heat or something that we can use to power our transportation and heat our homes and power our electronics and in general useful work. So what happens is not making something out of nothing, but rather converting from one form to another. And so what form is being converted into useful work? As you know, there are various words that are used to describe whatever the background energy of the universe might be. I like the ancient term ether, as long as people recognize that what we're talking about is not the 18th century view of a solid liquid filling all space or something like that, but rather a dynamic, non-material, ever present everywhere, although at different densities, and present throughout the universe at different densities. That there's so much to be learned about the science and engineering and mechanics of converting that into useful work. So it's a science in the form of being birthed. There isn't even a professional association of ether technologists or zero-point energy converter engineers or whatever they end up being called. There's no professional association to force an agreement on terminology. There's a lot of individuals around the world, and some of them are working together as teams, but yet there's such a diversity of vocabulary that it is confusing to the public, but that's where we're at right now. And prototypes are prototypes. They're proving the principle, but you can't expect, it's just like Wilbur and Orville Wright build a prototype of an airplane. They didn't get out there on a beach and build a Boeing 747. They built a clunky prototype that just could hop along the beach for a ways and get off the ground for a certain distance. And so we don't have what can be when all the best minds put their heads together and decide to engineer products that do end up in the hardware store shelves. And at that point, it's out, and the world can be transformed with all those new possibilities. And there, I always put in the disclaimer that we in the new energy field in general don't see free energy as a magic bullet. It's not technology is going to save us. That's what we've been accused of by some of the critics. But no, we realize that this is only a tool. Technology is only a tool, and it can be used to clean up the planet, and it can be used to rejuvenate local economies, and it can be used to kind of even out the playing field. Whereas right now we've got an elite in the world that a percentage of a percent that own everything and boss everybody else around through their owning the media and everything. That all has to change.
Yeah, it's very interesting what you say. The notion that technology will save us is really deeply ingrained in everything, even that I've been taught at school and also at university, is that technology is the end. It's not a means, it's the end. Basically, you are working and aspiring to work to bring technology forward, and that will save you, which is kind of backwards. If we don't, exactly like you said, if we don't use the technology responsibly, then what are we even creating? What kind of world are we creating in that sense?
One of the first people I interviewed, Adam Tremblay, said, and he is an astrophysicist, and he said, "Great technology won't save us, but great humanity will save the world."
Yeah.
Yes.
Hmm.
It's mostly about the willpower, I feel, if we want to change. And that's maybe the thing we want to communicate. Like, let's say apart from the free energy, like if we find a new energy source that really rocks the boat, the economic system may change. And how did you experience what, because you met a lot of inventors, what their struggles were? Because we hear from stories that when they have the technologies, it's hard to take the next step to actually bring it to the individuals in society, because, well, the economy will change. So there's no free space to flourish in a safe space. What's your experience with that?
Yeah, I think practically everybody working in the new energy field, like with a few exceptions, is short of financial resources. And so, I found that out early on when I met the first inventor, that they run out of money because they have been so focused on building one prototype after another, and they borrowed money from their friends, and they max out their credit cards in order to buy magnets and wires and get machine shop work done to get the shaft machine. And so they come to a dead stop for lack of money, and then they are vulnerable to people who come along with very unhelpful business plans. Um, for example, they might find themselves embroiled in a scam where somebody is out there selling shares of a company in their name, and they end up in trouble. You know, that's one of the things that has happened. Or they just languish and alone, isolated and bitter, and give up. A lot of inventors have taken their knowledge to the grave, which is sad. So lack of resources for most. Although, you know, good sign of the times is that we do see some now, like the Sapphire Project, that are well funded, and they're going to be proving out exciting things about the new science. So, and even here and there, I know in recent years, a couple of inventors have gotten some philanthropic funding, and not huge amounts, but certainly enough to keep them going for another year or so. And that never happened before.
So times are changing, indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's maybe I want to know, because you've been here in this field for so long. What's the difference you see? Like, this field is growing. How's that your experience?
It is growing, and I think that it'll take another leap as more people, you know, take for instance the news yesterday, um, that will open up some more people's eyes to the fact that maybe there have been advanced civilizations that
Like
that visit
UFOs?
this. You know, I disagree with the spin that the mainstream narrative puts on it of that this is a threat, and so we have to build more space weapons. That totally revolts me. But I think that, you know, there are going to be some people around the world who say, oh, well, nobody ever reported seeing a gas cap on a UFO. So what's the source of propulsion, and what's keeping the inertial forces from schmassing whatever life being is in there, you know? Questions like that, more people will be asking. So that's one, you know, the mainstream isn't going to lead that discussion, but
Hmm.
there's, I never underestimate the human spirit. It's something that artificial intelligence will never be able to match.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
the creativity of the human spirit, and the, you know, be able to leap to ask the important questions, because AI is never going to be inspired by some higher force helping them. AI is just what's been input into it by people who have a limited worldview, and that's it.
Mm. What do you think needs to happen for free energy to thrive? Is it that source of inspiration? Because what I've found being in free energy for a little while is I get random downloads of just inspiration. And I know that a lot of other inventors seemingly are just looking at a tree and all of a sudden something new comes to them, and that evolves into building a device or a new equation or things like that. So I'm curious as to what you think is needed for the next step to bring free energy to quote unquote the mainstream or
Well, I think you're on to the main source. Um, just more people around the world opening themselves to learning from nature, and going within, unplugging from the TV or whatever they're addicted to, and that's one thing. It's kind of, there aren't enough people, I think, spending time in meditation or in contemplation, in peace and quiet, in being unplugged, and just wandering in the natural world. And, that's what science used to be. Physics used to be called natural philosophy, as you know. And so it was open to anybody. You didn't have to have a PhD and have gone to the well respected university. Even then it would help back in the 18th century, but still anybody could go out there and wander in nature and ask a lot of questions and observe, like Schauberger observed nature so closely. That was his genius, coupled with his, I'm sure he tuned in. Yeah, I met an inventor in Austria who was like another Schauberger, Johann Graunder. And he reminded me so much of the story of Johann Graunder because he just spent time when he'd come to a blank wall with his invention. He would just sit quietly in nature or on his porch, and the answers would come. So yeah, you're on the right track there. And what it would take for this to be going big time, I think is on its way. It has to be a consciousness evolution. It has to be enough critical mass of people waking up and treating each other differently, replacing the corrupt institutions. Because as long as Wall Street and as long as the oil companies have their claws in academia so deeply with their grants and everything that they give, that the universities are not as free thinking as they used to be. As long as politicians can be bought and sold, so those laws have been put in place by that give corporations personhood and all this nonsense. All that has to go so that things open up, and it will be, I think, the only way it can be is a decentralized world, because right now the centralization of power is keeping such a hold on everything. Whereas where humankind would really show how we can live harmoniously is when we have local control of our resources. And so local and regional economies thrive, and their resources are owned not by some distant corporation, but rather the people who are there on the ground and care about stewarding their water and their forests, and their soils.
I think that's one of the major implications also for free energy. I see this happening as well. The decentralization is one of the major things that not only people reclaim their own sovereignty as human beings, but they also get in touch with what they do locally, what they eat, what they wear, what they exchange with the environment around them. And so that brings me to my question is, how do you see the world evolving in terms of implications? What kind of implications would free energy bring more? Because I think this is so big, it will change on so many levels. What does the world look like in 20 years?
Well, we could clean up even waterways that have been polluted, with abundant electricity, or some technologies like Ruggiero Santelli said that he could clean up waterways with his technologies, and others have said that. That's one thing. So all the ways to clean up the environment, the polluted soils, the ability of new technologies to transmute elements will come into play. And we won't have to do as much mining of metals, because new elements can be created. And who knows, I like to envision the beauty that can be created in cities where you have an emphasis again on the human love of beauty, and so the architecture will be soaring, and maybe with the new materials it can be strong but translucent walls, and so beauty, and of course what has to come first is the harmony among people, in order that these new technologies, which are so powerful, will be used responsibly. So there'll be major changes, because what we have now, even if we go up to what's called a new normal, what's being described is not adequate enough to get humankind on a sustainable path.
Yeah.
So it will be quite different, and a lot of people in the meantime will have a lot of adjusting to do. I remember the theme of the 2004 New Energy Movement Conference in Portland, Oregon was the courage to change, because that's a big thing. Is there's a lot of resistance to change. It feels safer to just go with what you know, even though it's not the best. But that's where I have hope for the young people. You have the courage, you have the drive, because it's your world that's being created, and you're getting together and working together internationally, and that just gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say we're all working towards this vision that you're describing of a beautiful, harmonious society that begins with the individual and encapsulates absolutely everyone. So that's very exciting, and I'm looking forward to creating that. And we already are in the process of doing that. So
Yeah.
it's a beautiful journey.
We still have to go through the mud, though.
Indeed.
And it's there for
And
a
that can be
reason.
beautiful. That's beautiful
Yes.
too.
Yeah.
Yes.
But going together and taking advantage of the best of technology that we already have now, like you're taking advantage of the communications technology.
Yes.
Which reminds me, that's another aspect that possibly could be transformed, because there used to be people who tell me about some Russian scientists that they'd met who talked about torsion field technology, and that we could have communication systems that didn't operate on the electromagnetic spectrum that we're working with right now, but rather something entirely different. And the way they described what it could do, I thought of my experiences with ESP. Like it's not requiring any wires or any lagging of time. Across the planet, you can communicate. So don't ask me to explain the technology that they would be using, but it just lit up for me as another sign of hope that in any field we could transform what we have now to having more harmonious technologies.
Beautiful.
Transportation, yeah, everything.
And how, what is your work currently today, or like these days? What are you working on these days?
Well, I'm always a lot of time on calls with inventors that I'm encouraging, particularly, as in a sisterly or grandmotherly way, and I'm always, now that the Spanish edition of Hidden Energy is finally published, I'm thinking more and more of writing blog posts, of course, but also it's fun. I'm finding it's fun to write about some of the early adventures and even more recent adventures that I've had in the field. Kind of a memoir, not of my whole life, not an autobiography, but just I'm only going to write what's fun.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, how can we find out more about your work? Do you have a website? Where can we find you or the folks?
Yeah, JeaneManning.com is where I'm going to keep the information coming. And Jeane is spelled in an unusual way with one N and an E, Jeane, Manning.com is where I'll hang out.
We'll definitely put that in
Awesome.
the description. So if you're watching
Totally.
this, check it out.
And maybe the question to you, what are your currently, what are the struggles you face, and what do you want to ask the community? Like, hey, I'm struggling with this. What kind of help would you want from the universe?
Well, everybody could use some help in things like authors need technical help that if I'd had more technical help with, or any, with getting that Spanish manuscript wrestled into submission. But in general, I'm really fortunate. It's the inventors that really need the financial help, and you uh, you people are providing what I really need, which is the feeling of being part of a team, the companionship in this work, and I'm getting it from others too. So um, I'm just really fortunate.
Hmm.
Well, we're fortunate to have you, and thank you for sharing and being here and not giving up, because I think it's easy to give up after being unheard for so long, or not giving not being given the spotlight as we wish free energy would have. So thank you so much.
Thank you all.
I still have a question relating to what we've said a little earlier about the hope for the future, and or maybe
Oh
a
yeah.
couple of questions. I'm really curious as to what the vision is of your children, or the generation, probably around the same age as us, assuming, what they think about your work and how they see the future of the world unfolding in front of their eyes.
My children are supportive of my work. Um, they're so busy with their lives, though, that it's not really their focus. They're really focused on their work. Like my daughter is focused on a project that she's communications coordinator for, which is bringing back the salmon to the Upper Columbia River. Her employers are 5 levels of government, including 3 Aboriginal groups, 3 First Nations in Canada, and so she's doing her own work, and you know, and my sons too. They're all busy with their families, and I have grandchildren who are busy learning. Like my granddaughter is exceeding in school, but that and dance, and that takes her full time. So um, I have the family support, um, but sometimes they wonder, when's this going to really happen? All this stuff that mom's been talking about for so many years, and and that they're the reason that I can't wait for the big celebration when we're dancing in the streets to celebrate the free energy hit main time, big time.
Yeah, that party is going to be galactic. It's going to be
Yeah,
of epic proportions.
Really,
the
yeah.
earth will shake, dancing with all humankind.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody will have to come up with a theme song so we can all around the world be singing the same thing and dancing to it.
That's a good idea. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, yeah.
Theme song.
And
Uh,
so I have many peers, the people of my age in my environment that don't see it as rose colored as we do, probably. And I'm curious as to what you would encourage them to do or to find out in order to feel also this trust that also I feel within. So what would you like to communicate with the youth that is not feeling so invigorated yet?
I would encourage them to come to their own conclusions and not be put off or deterred by their professors or other people that they look to for expertise who say, don't bother to go there, that's impossible, perpetual motion, be wasting your time, but rather investigate for themselves. Connect with the global breakthrough energy movement. If there's going to be any conferences coming up, read the books or watch the videos that Global BEM has put online. Just generally investigate and the more that they can connect with other people who are also willing to look outside the box, the better. If they're tuned in just to the popular culture, it's pretty darn depressing. It's all dystopia in sci-fi and entertainment. And I like what a rebel named Caitlin Johnson says. She says she's a utopia prepper. Instead of preparing for dystopia, she's hoping for something better. And it's not just empty hope. It's not just like your priest tells you to have faith or something. It's grounded in real science. Have a look. You'll see that real scientists with strong expertise and credentials are doing this work.
Yeah. Amazing. That's some solid advice. Thank you.
I think with that we can say goodbye.
Wow.
How are you guys feeling?
I'm feeling good about this.
Yes.
I want to thank you very much, Jeane, for your time and effort all of those years, and also right now in this interview. I think it's been amazing.
My pleasure.
Yes.
All right. Till next time.
Thank you.
Much love.
Much love. Yes.
Love.